This is the Starlight Express Alumni Podcast.
Hello everyone, my name's Graham Martin. I'm a Starlight Express alumni. My journey with Starlight began in 1992 with the revamped production at the Apollo Victoria in the West End, London's West End, where I played the role of Dustin. I then spent a decade with the show, in and out of the show, playing greaseball on occasions, and in the final cast, 2002, I was alternate Hopper for the final year.
Very cool, very cool. So you've got a little bit of experience on that stage.
Yeah, I have, and I only did the London production, and it's one thing being able to skate. In London, they used to have a skate school. I think they do in Germany and various other productions. But it's one thing learning to skate, but then it's a whole other ball game learning to skate the set, because especially with the London set, there were bits of the bridge which would connect to the Stalls track or the upper circle track, and there were lips all the way around that you had to step over, and you had to know where they were, because if you tried to roll over these lips, you were going down. So the one thing about the London set, which everyone who's done the London show will remember, probably the scariest part of it was what we called the S-bend, which was literally an S in the circle, and getting around that. There was a lot of accidents when you were first learning to skate that set. But that was probably the hairiest part of it, I would say, the S-bend.
Wow. Yeah, I know I worked with many of you London Starlighters, and like Michael Rand, I worked with him a lot. And so a couple of you guys there. So how did you first, let's go back a bit. I want to, well, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate that. How did you first find out about Starlight Express?
Starlight Express was the first show I ever saw in the West End when I was about 14. And I literally took a bus from the northeast, where I'm from in England, took a 6-hour bus journey down to London just to see the show, watched a matinee of the show, and then came back, another 6-hour journey back the same day. I had the cast album and I loved it. I loved it, and I wanted to see the show live. There was also a guy by the name of Jeffrey Stevens, who was from my local area in the northeast. And when I went down to see the show, we'd done some amateur dramatics together. We did a production of Oliver where he played Noah Claypole and I was just one of the workhouse boys. He was a few years older than me, but he was playing Dustin in that production that I went to see. And I sort of sent him a letter and said, I was one of the workhouse boys in the production of Oliver that you did. And it was so great to see you in the show. And we're friends now, me and Jeff. And he lives in LA now, I think. And so that was sort of my first introduction to Starlight. Then I went to drama school, as most people did back in those days. And I was just very fortunate. Well, I know they were looking for people to join the London company. They were closing the show for literally a couple of weeks and then revamping it to the new, this is in 92, to the new version. So they were getting rid of a couple of characters, notably Caboose, CB, and Belle was a character that was taken out of the show. And they were putting Andrew Lloyd Webber had written some new songs for the show. Rather than 5 races, there was only going to be 4. So it was quite a big thing at the time. And I basically taught myself to skate in car parks, and just every night I would put the soundtrack on my Walkman and just skate around this car park and literally teach myself to skate. And I auditioned around that time, and I'll be honest with you, I'd listened to the soundtrack, and Dustin was always done with a Cockney accent previously. Up until then, and when I auditioned, they said they were looking at me for the role of Dustin. And when I auditioned for Trevor Nunn, I started doing it in this Cockney accent, and Trevor Nunn said, "No, Graham." He said, "I want you to use your own accent. I love your accent. Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm place called Middlesbrough in the northeast, and he said, "I love your accent." He said, "I want Dustin to be a really sort of working class sort of freight train." So he said, "Just do it in your own accent," which I did, and they liked it. They liked it, and they cast me. And I think there was a lot of the cast that were in the show at the time stayed with the show for the revamped version. So they were doing, I think Reva was one of them, Reva Rice. She was playing Pearl, and they were doing one version during the day at night time and rehearsing a completely different version of the show during the day. How they did it, I'll never know. You know, even the rap was the beginning of Act 2 rap was completely changed. Yeah, and so that's how it came about. And I was matched up with Richard Mylan, who was flat top at the time. And it was funny, actually, when we did Freight, for example, in the rehearsal process, Arlene Phillips said to me and Richard, when Flat Top and Dustin introduced themselves, I'm the Big Hopper and all that, Arlene Phillips said, "Richard Graham, just go out the room and work on something and come back and show me," which we did. And we kind of did that ourselves. And she was like, "Great, I love it." And it kind of stuck in the show then. I think that introduction of those particular freight trains stayed in the show. I went to see a version 15 years later on tour in the UK in Manchester, and I'm sat watching it, and Dustin and Flat Top introduced themselves in Freight, and I was like, "That's what we did." It was exactly
that little bit that they do. That was you.
Traveling with Gravelin. I don't know. Yeah, I think some of the lyrics have changed over the years in various productions, but it was the traveling with Gravelin.
Yeah.
That section was all me and Richard. Yeah, and it seemed to. I saw it in Germany, and that section was in the show in Germany as well. So, yeah.
Well, what's great about this is that I get a chance to really, and I'll tell you, yesterday I connected with a lot of the Starlight fans and the presidents of the Starlight fan clubs, and just wanted to find out because they're loving the podcasts. And I asked them, what are some of the things you love the most about the podcasts? And most of them said they love hearing about the beginnings, the audition, the rehearsal, and all that process, how it came together. So for you sharing that story is awesome. And also a nice little connection is that Reva does mention, I don't know if you saw her interview, she does mention that time when she was doing the rehearsing during the day and then doing the show at night, how crazy that was.
Yeah, I think all the three Rockies were the same. There was only 9 of us that joined the show. So the other cast members, they would, like you say, they were doing, one show at night and rehearsing a completely different show with 2 characters missing. There was no caboose anymore. So they still had a caboose in the show in the evening and no caboose in rehearsals.
Wow. I can't imagine that, but I know when I went to Germany and my 3rd time doing Starlight was my second time in Germany, if that makes sense, like the 92, 93 changeover. And I had done the US tour with Reva, and then they wanted to change the German production to the US tours, the way we did it there. And so it was the same situation. The actors were doing the show at night, but during the day, learning this totally new show. And I spoke to another Starlighter, one of the other podcasts, and she was saying yes, because at the show we had to do this for one choreography, but then in the new show we had to do it this way. She says, I don't know why they had to change it. It was very confusing. So it was a lot of fun. So your rehearsal process? I know you said that you had practiced skating. You were familiar with the fact that you had to be on skates and perform everything on skates on this crazy set. What was the rehearsal experience like for you physically, and then bringing it all together with the music and the acting and the costumes and that stage, which stage was basically the guinea pig for the other stages.
Yeah. And when you learn to skate. We had there's always a skate coach on the show, and we had a great one in Mark Davis. It was
Yes.
at the time.
Yeah, he actually trained us for the German production back in when we were in Hamburg. Mark Davis, I loved him. He was a great guy.
Yeah, and a great teacher as well. But yeah, like once you learn how to skate, and then the first day on the set, Michael Fraley comes in and he teaches you how to skate the set, because the lips and the pieces of set where it connects, like the bridge to a track or something like that, there's little lips that you have to step over. You have to know where they are. You kind of get used to it after a while the more you do it, but it's not like, I think the German set's a lot smoother.
Oh yeah.
Whereas the London set, there was a lot of, you have to step up onto that piece of set. You can't roll over it. So you had to actually learn how to skate the set as well. And there was some, like the S-bend was really hairy, especially if you're an engine, you had a helmet on. And as you know, Peter, you've only got so much visual. You can't really see out of the sides. All you can see is that, really. So it is. I mean, it gets into your body after a while, but it's pretty scary to begin with. Just going over the bowl, there was a lip at the top of the bowl, I remember. So in rolling stock, I think the German one's quite smooth, but there was a lip. You had to step into the bowl. You couldn't roll over the top of the bowl, otherwise your wheels would jam and you'd fall forward. So all these little things but when you watch the show, people they can't see that. You try and make it look as smooth as possible. I always say when people used to watch the show, people say to me, of course, probably, did you ever fall over? Well, yeah, of course I fell over lots of times, but I think a lot of the audience forgets actually that we're on skates, and it's until they see somebody actually fall on the floor, then they remember and go, they've got roller skates on. So it was never a bad thing if anybody fell.
Well, that was great. How was the process of learning the choreography? Because the stage is a beast of itself, and I can't imagine that the German production, and even when we did the U.S. tour, it was so smooth. There were little lips every once in a while, but I never really noticed lips. It was just so well done. They learned so much from the London production, that by the time they got to us and the New York production, because the New York also, the stage on Broadway was a bit of a danger zone also, but they learned so much, and the German set was so smooth. We had some issues at the beginning. So how did you piece the choreography, the vocals? What was that experience like the stage is a beast of itself, but getting on the skates in the costume, especially Dustin's costume.
Yeah, that was the most difficult thing, because I had this padded. I mean, the weight of the costumes anyway, they are so heavy, and especially Dustin as well. You have this whole padded suit on underneath the actual costume, which itself is heavy. So getting used to that, and also I had to skate. Greg Ellis was rusty, who played it in Vegas, I think, as well. He was rusty, and Greg could skate. He used to be in race 4. I remember literally we would come down from the circle down the bridge, and he would do it all without braking at all. And I had to learn very quickly because I was skating behind him. So I think in some ways I was really thrown in at the deep end, because not only was I in 2 races, one with Popper and one with Rusty, but I was put behind one of probably the best skaters in the company. So I had to learn very, very quickly. He was fast.
Yeah. I remember a lot of the coaches in the German production when Drew Williams and Michael Rand were Greaseball and Electra, and they were phenomenal skaters, and they would do their races almost like really, truly racing. And the coaches would just hang on for dear life. Sometimes they couldn't hang on. But so I remember the Dustin costume. I remember backstage after a number, Dustin would pull that stuff down, and they look like they'd be dying from the sweat, and they'd be soaked. And then, of course, the costume starts soaking up the sweat, and that added to the weight of it.
Yeah. And this is the time when they first tried the Megamix. 92 is when they put the Megamix into the show. So, you know, you do light at the end of the tunnel. That was hard enough. But then you knew you had another 12 minutes of a Megamix to do. And I used to wear a long-sleeved T-shirt underneath my padding. And I used to, when I came off and took my costume off, you could wring it out like a dishcloth. It was soaking wet from sweat. And my skates used to rot quite a lot. I went through quite a lot of skates because my legs would sweat and the sweat would run into my skates, and they would rot really, really quickly. So I'd get through a lot of skates. And the bad thing about that is you get comfortable in a pair of skates. You don't want to break in a new pair. But when they're falling apart, you have to.
That's amazing. I mean, I did this. I did probably about six contracts of Starlight, and I never experienced that. I mean, I used to sweat, but I never experienced the rotting of my skates. I had the same skates, except for the Lonesdale boots when we used it in Lonesdale, because I was a Rocky. Basically, I was a Rocky. Yeah. And so those boots got worn out pretty fast, but not like what you're describing, the rot. I never even considered the possibility of that, but there's another piece of trivia.
Yeah, and you know, because I have the knee pads on, so the sweat from my knee downwards would just run straight into the boots, so they would rot from the inside. And I know, you know, you used to get used to a pair of boots, and then you'd have to change them, and you know, it was nothing worse than trying to break in a new pair of pair of boots, because it would take a little while for them for you to get used to them. Yeah. But yeah, I had to do that quite often.
Wow. Now, what was your, if you can recall, what was your first time on stage doing? What was your opening night like? The first time on stage, you rehearsed.
Yeah, I you know, I'll be honest with you, Peter. I don't really think I remember it, because I was probably just so in that bubble and frightened and just hoping everything would go well, which it did, because I don't have any memories that it didn't. But yeah, it was, you know, it was Trevor Nunn and Arlene Phillips. They worked us pretty hard. And it was, you know, we didn't know whether certain things were going to work. There was a new duet that replaced Only You. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a couple of characters had been taken out of the show, and there was, you know, big characters. So we weren't sure how it was going to work to begin with, but they were just trying to bring it up into the 90s at the time. That was the idea. They felt that the rap, for example, was a bit dated, and they needed to bring that up to date. And the CB character, it was known as CB in London, the Caboose character. They thought, oh, that's all CB radios and stuff, which is a bit 80s. Mm-hmm. So that was the reason for them losing that character. But there was a time, I remember in rehearsals, Arlene Phillips didn't want to lose the There's Me song that CB sang. So she said, well, let's give it to Dustin. So for 3 weeks, I did that CB number. And then they realized after 3 weeks, because there was sort of like previews, they were trying it out. They were always changing for a couple of months. They were always changing things. And they realized that there was in Act 1, there was a ballad by Pearl, then Race 1, then another ballad by, then There's Me, and then another ballad by Pearl. So there was 4 ballads together with a race in the middle, and they thought it made the show lull a little bit. So they thought, we're going to have to take one of these ballads out. And, you know, Pearl was the leading lady, so they took There's Me out. But for about 3 weeks, I as Dustin, at the end of Race 1, when Greaseball disconnects Dinah, I would go over as Dustin and sing There's Me to her. Wow. It nearly made the album. But they cut it just before we made the album. So but I still got the same number of points on the album. You were rated on so Greaseball, Rusty, Electra, Popper, Pearl, etc. They'd be on 5 points, depending on how much they sang on the album, and then it would go down to Ensemble, who'd be on 1 point. And I managed to get 3.5 because at that time the song was still in the show, but it didn't make the album in the end.
That's funny. That's interesting. All these little pieces of information are fascinating for me, and I didn't know any of that. That's pretty awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Now, what are some of your? You've shared some memories, and what are some of your greatest memories from the show, from the whole time you were there, that just pop out to you? That are just great memories.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people, I made so many friends on that show. If you go through my friends list on Facebook, there's so many people from Starlight, well over 100 people that I'm still in contact with, and I think that for me, a lot of shows do say that they are a family, but Starlight, it really is a family. And I mean, I was very fortunate. We got a lot of television coverage because it was a new show. It was being revamped, so we did a lot of television slots and things like that, which was nice. We got to do a new album, which was great. And one thing that does stand out was we got to do the Royal Variety performance. We did Light at the End of the Tunnel at the Royal Variety. And we literally had a show that night, the same night. So we all got into costume. We all got on a bus, and they took us to the Dominion Theatre, where we performed Light at the End of the Tunnel for Charles and Diana when they were still together. But what's quite remarkable about this is that it was their last public engagement, Prince Charles and Lady Diana. It was their last public engagement together, was this particular Royal Variety performance. And then just afterwards, a few days later, they announced that they'd split up. So it's quite a thing. And we all got a certificate saying that we performed for His Royal Highness Prince Charles and Lady Diana, which was really lovely. But yeah, we did that. And then as soon as we'd done our little section, which was at the beginning of the show, they put us all back on a bus, and we went back to the Apollo Victoria, and we did Starlight. So we didn't get to stay around and meet them at the end, when everyone stays on stage and the prince comes up and they're introduced, because we had to go back and do the show. But yeah, I think that was probably one of the highlights.
Wow.
But as I say, we got to do quite a lot of stuff, which was great.
It's awesome because many of the Starlighters will share stuff like you just did. You shared some things that no one knows about, and this is what really is so important about doing something like this, that I'm finding that this truly history. This is history here. I mean, Starlight Express is in the history books. It's a phenomenal success, and it's still running in Germany, and so it's phenomenal. And the fan base is crazy. We have adults that are in their 40s that their kids are fans, and we have Starlighters. Of course, Debbie Herndon, her daughter Lauren was in the show at one point, and so it's pretty crazy. So the history is just so rich with history. Now, what's lessons? Many of us drew lessons that we carry through our lives, but we learned it in our experience with Starlight Express. What's some of your greatest life lessons that you took away from your experience from Starlight Express?
Well, I think, I've been very fortunate that I've had a 25-year career now, and Starlight was my first big show. And you get taught so much at drama school, but nothing quite prepares you for being in a show in the West End. And I think what I've learned was just how to conduct yourself. Starlight goes so much bigger than just the show in London. Everybody knows everybody. There's always a connection with somebody. So I think your reputation always precedes you. Yeah, it's such a big community, and just treat everyone with respect. And turn up, work hard, keep your nose clean. I think that's what I learned. It was my first big job, and I learned from watching other people who've been in the show a long time. I rarely went off. I was rarely off the show. I was very fortunate. I didn't really get injured, probably all the padding. But yeah, I think just respect for the other people you're working with, and respect for the show.
I appreciate that. Now, I mean, I know for me, Starlight is a part of what I did in my career. I've done a lot of shows, TV stuff, and commercials. I still do that, but Starlight definitely is a powerful highlight in my career. But there's other things that I'm doing. So I always want to wrap up the podcast, just giving you guys an opportunity to share with everyone what you're doing and what are your passions now, what kind of work. I know you're doing a show now. And so share with everyone what you're doing now.
Well, at the moment, I've been associated for 10 plus years now with a show called Blood Brothers, which is it's a musical which is set in Liverpool, written by Willie Russell. And I basically, I did it in the West End in 2006. I did a year in the West End, and it's not on in the West End now. It was up there with Starlight, actually. It ran in the West End for, I think, something like 20 years.
Wow.
And is up there as one of the longest running West End shows with Starlight, Cats, and Phantom of the Opera, Les Miserables. But it's on tour in the UK, and I've been on tour on and off again for about the last 10 years, about the last decade. I'm multi-role in this show, which is lovely. So I have 18 different costume changes.
Wow.
And then the nice thing is it's like, you get the recognition of, oh my gosh, it's the same guy playing that. I pop up as a policeman, and then as a teacher, and then as a bailiff, and then something else, and you get the recognition. Oh, it's the same guy, which is quite nice. And it's a great show. It's very, very funny. And then it's very, very tragic at the end. So we get standing ovations at every performance. So yeah, it's kind of like I've had 10 years of Starlight Express and 10 years of Blood Brothers so far. So yeah, I've been very fortunate.
Well, now, if somebody wanted to find out more about you and the work that you're doing, where can they go? They get socials, or do you have a website? How can they find out?
I don't have a website, but you can find me on Twitter. It's just at Graham Martin on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, Graham Martin. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's mainly the social media.
Yeah, and also everyone that's watching, and if you're listening, right on this page, right below, we're gonna have images and all links. You sent me photos and stuff. It's all gonna be right below, guys. And if you want to find out more, all the links for Graham is going to be right below pictures. Enjoy that. Reach out to him and just give him a wave. If you are a Starlight alumni, definitely reach out to us if you have not already. But Graham, thank you so much for connecting with me. And I do have to take a moment to thank you for those words of encouragement that you had sent me. I remember getting my phone, and I saw what you wrote, and I read it to my wife, and I got emotional on it, because little did I know that this podcast was going to be what it is now, and it's just exploded. And it started where I was at the gym. I get up early, I go to the gym, and then I was listening to a playlist that I created for myself that had songs that the theme of the songs was about being legends, being legendary. And so that was my mindset. And so as I was training and listening to the words of these songs about, being a legend, making a difference, it popped up, started thinking about some of my Starlight friends, because I had met with a couple days ago, and I said, gosh, someone needs to talk about what, the show that we did, because we were reminiscing, the ups and downs of it and the experience of life, and how now, because I'm going to be 60 years old, and how Starlight was a massive part of my journey. And I said, what, somebody should talk about this. I said, wait a minute, why don't I start a podcast? So So I sent out to a private message of all my Starlight friends. I say, hey guys, I have this idea, and I'm looking for people to interview. Who's up for it? Who's interested? And I got this within minutes. I started getting all these people. I'm in. You know, Reva says I'm in. Jimmy Lockett said I'm in, and Michael Rand says I'm in. All these people were saying I'm in. I said, oh my gosh! And then that was 2 weeks. That was as of recording this, that was 2 weeks ago. Now I've got, as of this right now, over 25 interviews in the can, and it just exploded. So thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Peter. It's just such a special thing, isn't it? And I think, as I said earlier, if you've done Starlight, it holds such a special place in your heart. And you know, and we've all been through a similar experience, and you know, it's something I can even remember choreography from the show. I can even remember Light at the End of the Tunnel choreography. I could do it now. There's not many shows that you can say that about. You know, you do a job and you kind of forget about it, but Starlight is such a special thing. And thank you for doing this and reconnecting people, because it's just great. It's so good, and to see people are, you know, signing up and listening to the podcast and stuff. It's just fantastic. So congratulations.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for doing this, and for also sharing. Initially, you shared with a lot of your Starlight friends. I really do appreciate that, and thank you so much. And I will let you know when this goes up, and it's going up every Sunday. And so I'm getting your things out. I can't wait to get yours out, but I'll have some little teasers, let people get a taste of the podcast. But so I'll let you have the final word. What's the final thing you want to say to everyone out there, to Starlight alumni, and also to the fans out there?
Well, just to the fans, you know, thank you for keeping Starlight alive. It's you guys that go and see the show over and over again, that keep Starlight so alive, and you know, and something for the likes of me to reminisce about. And it really is a family, and I cherish my 10 years with the show.
Well, thank you so much.
A lot of happy memories.
Pardon me?
And I've got a lot of very, very happy memories.
Well, thank you so much for joining in, Graham. I really do appreciate it. I'll stay in touch with you. And thank you so much. You have a great day.
My pleasure, Peter. Good to talk to you. Take care.
Take care.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this episode of Starlight Express Alumni Podcast. Next week, I will get together with another alumni. Be sure to subscribe. You can subscribe right here on the website at starlightexpress.club. We are definitely on the iTunes and Stitcher, and we're looking to get on the other platforms, so make sure you check there, subscribe there, and stay connected. If you are a Starlight alumni, please be sure to reach out to me if you would like to be on the podcast. Would love to hear your stories and share your story with the Starlight Express fans and other alumni. Look forward to sharing with you next week. Everyone, have a great day.